Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I'm Ali Itani, filling in for Katie Johnson. This week, we speak with Professor Nick Maynard, an Oxford surgeon who's volunteered in Gaza for 15 years with medical aid for Palestinians. Nearly 2 years into Israel's military campaign, we ask about Gaza's collapsing health system, the injuries seen on the ground, and whether international law is protecting medical workers. Are Israeli denials of famine and civilian targeting credible? Should surgeons speak out publicly or in court? Doctor, thank you very much for joining us. You've been a regular visitor to Gaza for 15 years now, including during the current conflict. How would you describe Gaza's current health system and state of medical care?
It's in a terrible state. It's been almost completely dismantled by the Israeli military assault. It's always been a challenging place to practice healthcare, to provide healthcare, even before October 2023, because of the massive restrictions put on the Gazan economy, the lack of resources going in, the blockade by Israel. But it's been much worse over the last 2 years. And of the several trips I've been in Gaza since October the 7th, 2023, each trip has got much, much worse. So on the last trip I was there just a few weeks ago, the health system has been almost completely destroyed. And even in Nasser Hospital, where I was working, which is the last remaining major hospital, that's only very partly functioning. The lack of resources make it incredibly difficult to practice medicine there.
Well, you mentioned Nasser, so you volunteered there and Al-Aqsa, two hospitals that were struck by Israel. What were the conditions like?
Terrible. I mean, every hospital's been struck by Israel. Every single hospital's been attacked by the Israeli military assault. Nasser's been attacked several times. The most recent attack was just after I left, and although they claimed they were attacking Hamas militants, they in fact bombed the roof of the intensive care unit, the roof of the operating theatre complex. So a significant part of Nasser Hospital has been destroyed. It's not fully functioning. The amount of work it's having to deal with, because all the other hospitals have been largely disabled, overwhelms the capacity of the hospital. The lack of resources is dire. So there are people dying who would have been saved if there had been enough resources in the hospital. So the situation is catastrophically bad.
How acute was the shortage of resources and the dangers you faced?
They're very acute, and each day you don't know whether you're going to have enough resources to treat patients the following day. The fuel to keep the hospital going has to be, it almost runs out every week. They have to get a new amount of fuel every week, and you never know whether you're going to get any fuel at the end of that week. So you don't know whether you'll be able to power the ventilators, the lights, the operating theatres, the incubators, the materials we use in the operating theatre, the gauze swabs, the sterile drapes, the sterile gowns, the sterile gloves. They're in extremely short supply. We often run out of all of those things, and you have to use other equipment to try and make up for the lack of sterile equipment. The instruments we use are failing, many of them. So you're having to do operations with sometimes very unfamiliar instruments. So it is dire, and you never know from day to day whether there's going to be enough equipment to treat patients the following day.
As a surgeon with medical aid for Palestinians, how does it feel to be on standby for operating theater duty in a typical Gaza hospital?
It's you never really get a chance to relax at all, because you never know when you'll be needed. You're living in the hospital, so you're effectively on duty 24 hours a day. and you could be woken up. If you do go to bed at night, you could be woken up any second to go and treat mass casualties. Every day we had mass casualties, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. So there is no chance to relax. You have to rest when you can, but you don't know whether that'll be for 5 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. But it's important to stress that we're out there for several weeks at a time, and it's a very stressful environment. But of course, our amazing, inspirational Gazan colleagues have been living like this for 2 years, nearly 2 years. They've been living every second like this. So how they've coped with it is quite remarkable, really.
Can you describe the type of injuries you've seen and dealt with in Gaza? Any single image or moment that still haunts you?
Yeah, golly, I mean, I could spend hours telling you about moments that haunt me. I mean, in all my trips, I've been out there since October the 7th. They've all been full of terrible injuries. The first few trips, mainly explosive injuries from aerial bombardment or from artillery shells or from tank shells, but mainly explosive injuries with some gunshot wounds from the quadcopter drones. But my last trip, and I just returned a few weeks ago, my last trip, we saw a huge increase in gunshot wounds, and they were predominantly in young teenage males, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, who were being shot at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food distribution points. I saw these gunshot wounds almost daily, and the narrative we were getting from the victims, from their families, and indeed from Gazan healthcare colleagues of mine who used to go to these food sites to get food for their own starving families. The narrative was identical, that these young teenage boys who were getting food for their starving families were being shot by Israeli soldiers. And these were terrible gunshot wounds. On my second or third day in Nasser, I had a 12-year-old on the operating table who died under our hands. We couldn't save his life because of the severity of his injuries for having been shot by an Israeli soldier. And we saw multiple gunshot wounds throughout my stay there. And what made it even worse was the clustering, the pattern of injuries we saw, that to the extent that we saw sometimes on some days only gunshot wounds to the head and neck, on some days only gunshot wounds to the chest or the abdomen the next day, or the next day the legs or the arms. And on one day we saw 4 young boys who all came in with gunshot wounds to the testicles. And the clustering of these injuries, the pattern of the gunshot wounds was so striking that it was beyond coincidence in our view. And this pattern we all recognized, all the surgeons, all the emergency doctors, seemed to us as if the Israeli soldiers were playing target practice. We're going to go for the head and neck today, we'll go for the chest tomorrow, and we'll go for the testicles on Saturday. That was how stark the pattern of strikes were.
You saw catastrophic injuries and malnutrition, especially among children. Do they face consequent long-term complications?
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned in your earlier question, what will stick with me? And those gunshot wounds will, but also, as you quite rightly point out, the malnutrition I saw was just awful. Newborn babies dying of starvation, children dying of starvation, adults dying. And there were 2 children who I will never forget. Zainab, who was a 7-month-old girl who died because there was no formula feed. There was no infant formula feed to feed her at all in Nasser Hospital. And while she was dying, American doctors I knew who were coming into Gaza with formula feed in their luggage. The formula feed was being taken out of their luggage by the Israeli border guards. Every single can of formula feed was removed, and those cans could have saved Zainab's life. There was Habiba, another 11-year-old girl, who I will never forget, who I spent all night operating on once because she had such a bad explosive injury that shattered her lower esophagus. And I spent the whole night repairing her esophagus, only for her to die 4 weeks later because we couldn't get the right nutrition to feed her. So there are many children dying of starvation, but there are many children who are profoundly malnourished, who are experiencing severe developmental delays. They'll experience physical developmental delays, but also terrible neurological, mental development delays. And these, of course, will have profound long-term consequences. So even if there was unlimited food going into Gaza today, there would still be catastrophic consequences from the existing malnutrition for many, many years to come.
Many reports and your own testimony have described attacks on hospitals and medical infrastructure. Did you get a sense these were targeted and methodical attacks?
Most certainly. I was in Al-Aqsa Hospital last year when I was operating in the operating theatre, and we'd been told that morning by Kogat, the liaison branch of the Israeli army, that it was deconflicted, and I was operating and in the operating theatre next door to the intensive care unit, and that was attacked by an Israeli missile. Nasser Hospital's been attacked many times, Shifa Hospital, all the hospitals have been attacked, and this Israeli propaganda that they are only targeting Hamas militants and that they are targeting the hospitals purely because Hamas are using them as command centers. The evidence they provided for that is that they provided no verifiable, no credible evidence. And indeed, they are killing innocent healthcare workers and indeed patients in these hospitals. I was in Gaza in May 2023, 5 months before the events of October the 7th. I'd gone out there for a week to carry out cancer surgery, and we were caught up in a massive aerial bombardment from Israel when Islamic Jihad were firing rockets into Israel. And we witnessed with our own eyes how sophisticated the targeting of the Israeli bombing could be. We saw with our own eyes in Gaza City specific rooms, specific floors of buildings being taken out by the Israeli missiles, and the collateral damage was limited. There was some, but it was limited. Roll forward to post-October the 7th, we've seen whole communities, whole towns, whole camps being destroyed by indiscriminate bombing. And this is not targeted bombing. This is not protecting civilians. This is a widespread attack on the whole infrastructure of living in Gaza.
You just described these shots as target practice. How did the local population react to such behavior?
Well, they're shocked, of course, but they're not surprised because they've been witnessing this. They've been experiencing this for nearly 2 years. There is no doubt amongst those that live in Gaza and amongst those of us who travel to Gaza, there is not one shred of doubt that the Israeli military is targeting innocent civilians and committing war crimes on a daily basis. So, yes, everyone is shocked that they go to even more extreme, depraved measures, but none of us are that surprised because they've been doing it for 22 months.
Israeli officials routinely deny accusations of famine-like conditions and targeting of civilians. What is your response to that?
Well, they're lies, and I think that the world media need to call them out for these lies and not keep asking people like me or keep telling us in interviews that the Israelis claim this hasn't happened. They have provided, as I've said earlier, no remotely credible evidence, no verifiable evidence that to support those statements. And I think our government, our media need to call them out to their face and say, no, you are lying about this. We have multiple eyewitness testimonies from healthcare workers from abroad who've been in Gaza and come back with photographic evidence, with detailed testimony. So they need to be called out and they need to be told to their face that we know you are lying, we know this is not true.
Israel has repeatedly justified strikes on Gaza hospitals by alleging Hamas uses these facilities. Should they be rejected outright?
In exactly the same as my response to your previous question. They need to be called out and told, we know you are lying about this. We have no evidence from you that that is the case. You have not provided us with any verifiable or any credible evidence. And we have multiple eyewitness testimonies from hundreds upon hundreds of foreign healthcare workers who have seen no evidence of that. I was in Nasser Hospital just a few weeks ago, just a week or two before it was bombed. I had unlimited access to every single square inch of that hospital. It is inconceivable to me that it was being used as a Hamas command center. The part of the building they bombed 2 or 3 weeks ago, which they claimed were targeting Hamas infrastructure, Hamas militants, it was the roof of the intensive care unit. It was the roof of the operating theatres. And then the second tap bomb was the entrance to the main emergency room. I know those areas intimately. The fourth floor which they bombed was meters away from the area I was living in for a month. There are no Hamas militants there. It's inconceivable those areas are being used as command centres. So yes, they need to be called out by our media and by our governments, and they need to say to them, we know you are lying about this. You have not provided any evidence, but we don't do that.
Are you satisfied with international reactions to attacks on hospitals, be in Gaza by IDF or in Israel by Iran?
I'm not satisfied by the response of our governments, our media. I think the language is changing, and I welcome that. But it is far too little and far too late. But we need more than just strong language. We need actions, and our Western governments have failed to do that, and they need to start instituting very clear actions to stop Israel carrying out this genocide.
You've been awarded the Humanitarian Medal by King Charles for your work in Gaza. What keeps you going? Do you have plans to return to Gaza?
I do intend to return. I've been going for 15 years. What keeps me going is my love for the people of Gaza. I've got many dear friends, people I would call family, who live there. I treasure the relationships I have with them. I love them dearly. Many of my friends have been killed out there. It is the Gazan people who are the most heroic, the most inspirational people I have ever met in my life. They all are, but particularly the healthcare workers who have been working in the most unspeakable conditions, with their lives being threatened every single day, but they go to work. They're there to save the lives of their fellow Gazans. So it's the people that will keep me going back, and absolutely I will return.
After nearly 2 years of conflict, how are the medical workers in Gaza coping with lack of supplies, severe injuries, physical dangers, and psychological trauma?
They're on their knees. I mean, they are mentally and physically exhausted. And you quite rightly talk about their mental trauma. It is severe. I come out of Gaza having had a month there, exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally, very distressed by what I've seen. But I get a chance to get out after a month and go home to my loved ones. They don't get that opportunity. They've been doing this for 22, 23 months now, and they are on their knees. They're all starving. They're all hungry. Many of them are chronically ill. Some of them have lost 20, 30, even 40 kilograms in weight. They are starving. Their families are living in tents, who have no food. So when they finish their shift, they go down to the GHF food distribution points to try and get food for their families. They are on their knees. I don't know how they cope. They are, as I said earlier, they are a remarkably inspirational people, but they carry on working against all the odds. They're truly remarkable.
You've seen children with bullet wounds, dismembered bodies, and entire families uprooted. Do surgeons have a duty to mount media campaigns or testify in courts?
I do, and I mean, I think people will vary in how much they're prepared to do. I think that the work we do in Gaza is clearly of great value in terms of any lies we may save. And without anyway trying to understate what we do there, what we do is a drop in the ocean compared to the atrocities that continue every single day. And arguably, our greater power is the advocacy to provide our eyewitness testimonies to the rest of the world. So I feel, and I've felt very strongly from a personal perspective, I have a duty to do that. And I think that in the absence of any journalists being allowed into Gaza, the only strong evidence coming out is that provided by healthcare workers such as me. So yes, I do believe we have a duty to share it and to tell the world what is going on, because our governments are not doing that, our media are not being allowed to do that, and even when they do get evidence, a lot of the Western media is simply not showing it either. So I think Gaza has been fundamentally let down by the Western media, is been fundamentally let down by our Western governments. And those of us who have had the privilege of going into Gaza to help, have a duty to share what we have seen so the world knows what is going on.
You're tied to one of the world's top medical schools. Have you felt any pressure to stay silent or speak out? Have they failed Gaza's civilians?
I think that academic institutions and medical institutions in my country, in the United Kingdom, and indeed around the Western world have failed Gaza. They've largely been silent. My hospital has actually been generous in allowing me time to go to Gaza, and for them I'm very grateful. But it is remarkable how academic and medical institutions have largely been silent over Gaza. And when one compares how they have responded, for example, to the war in Ukraine, what I perceive to be the double standards and the hypocrisy are extreme. So yes, it has been largely silence. I haven't had any undue pressure put on me to stop talking. But I do know many colleagues of mine around the country who have been under extreme pressure. So I think it's reprehensible, the double standards and the hypocrisy demonstrated by our academic and medical institutions in the United Kingdom.
Have you been threatened or targeted because of your advocacy for Palestinians in international forums?
No, I mean, I've had some letters written to me, some very vitriolic letters sent to my hospital. I've had a lot of abuse on social media, but nothing that has really bothered me, to be perfectly honest. And I think that, and certainly none of which will stop me, because I think sharing evidence, telling the world is hugely important.
Can Gaza's healthcare system, physical infrastructure, medical personnel, and training systems be revived once the war is over?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you only have to look at the hospitals recover once the Israeli military stops assaulting them and moves on to another part of Gaza. Even Shifa Hospital, which has been almost completely destroyed, is now beginning to function again. Watching them rebuild parts of Nasser Hospital when it's attacked, they have the most remarkable ability to rebuild these structures. So yes, once there is a ceasefire, with the help of the rest of the world, they absolutely can rebuild it. But it's a mammoth task. And of course, the longer that Israel is allowed to carry on this destruction, the more difficult it will be to recover. But they have a remarkable ability to rebuild and recover. But they need to be given a chance, and they will need the support of the rest of the world.
If you could speak directly to world leaders from a surgical table in Gaza's OT, what would you say to them?
I would tell them, I would point out what is going on. I'm a humanitarian. I'm not a politician. I go there to help people, like the many hundreds of doctors and nurses who've been out there. But we have seen with our own eyes the most appalling, the most catastrophic war crimes being committed. The Gazan population is being destroyed, and the Western world, our Western governments, are allowing that to happen. You are all complicit in this. You are complicit because you are not stopping Israel doing this. And you need to listen to the evidence being given to you by people like me and other healthcare workers. You need to make a decision. Do you want to enjoy us? Do you want to believe us, those healthcare workers who are giving you eyewitness testimony and photographic evidence? People who have no axe to grind, no political agenda, we're simply humanitarians. Or do you want to believe the Israeli propaganda, the lies that everyone knows the Israelis are producing? Propaganda for which they have not provided any verifiable or credible evidence. You need to make a decision who you want to believe.
Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed for asking me on today.